Rimuru back 3000 year as a fifth true dragon. By Elite X0. During the final battle against Feldway, he had inevitably sent Rimuru to the end of time and space. After Feldway send Rimuru to the end of time and space, Rimuru decide to find a way to go back when he's wake up. However, Chrono-Saltation had not only thrown Rimuru to the end of time and space, but it had also locked him out from returning to the world using space-time leap, as if banning Rimuru's existence itself from the world, preventing his return. And Ciel also tell him that his timeline had already destroyed, so he cannot go back. After hearing that, Rimuru start to feel a lot of emotion inside him, sadness, regret, and pain. All the emotions you can think of come to him at once and start to make him go insane. In the end, Ciel find a way to time travel to the past, but risk is too high. It can destroy Rimuru's spiritual body if anything goes wrong. And so can Rimuru go back in a time unharmed? And what will be the consequences of it? Chapter 4. What in hell is this commotion? Prior to Rimuru's birth. Veldonava's POV. It has been a long time since I felt this anticipation. The cycle of creation, so familiar to me, now brings with it a sense of excitement I haven't experienced in ages. I had gathered my siblings, the great true dragons, to share with them the news of an impending arrival. Rimuru, the fifth true dragon. His birth, a marvel of creation, was to unfold within the void of my imaginary space, and the mere thought filled me with a mix of pride and cautious expectation. As I spoke to them, I described Rimuru not just as another being like ourselves, but as something entirely new, something that would embody the essence of nothingness itself. Unlike us, who personify parts of existence, Rimuru would represent the void, the very concept of non-existence. I could see the uncertainty in their eyes, particularly in Velgrind's. Her initial hesitation was almost tangible, a subtle tightening of her jaw, a flicker of jealousy perhaps. Velzard, ever the cautious one, wore her distrust openly. Her gaze narrowed as she considered my words. Pained me to see this reaction. I had hoped for enthusiasm, for joy at the prospect of a new sibling. But I knew my siblings well. In time, they would come to understand, to embrace Rimuru as one of their own. Velgrind and Velzard would visit him, I instructed them, and bond with him as sisters should. Their reluctance was evident, but they eventually agreed, albeit with some reservations. Then there was Veldora, ever the eager and reckless one. He practically leaped at the chance to meet his new brother. His enthusiasm was infectious, but I had to temper it with a word of caution. Veldora's power was immense, and his aura, though impressive, was far too volatile. In Rimuru's current state, still unformed, fragile, such an overwhelming presence could be dangerous, even fatal. I explained this to him gently, but I could see the disappointment that clouded his eyes, even as he tried to hide it behind a forced smile. Once you master your power, I reassured him, you will meet him, and when that time comes, I have no doubt that you two will be close. Veldora nodded, but I could sense his frustration. He was so eager to prove himself, to be the big brother he imagined himself to be. But this was a matter of caution, of protecting what was to come. I could only hope that in time Veldora would understand. As I looked at my siblings, I felt a surge of protectiveness. Not just for Rimuru, who was yet to be born, but for all of them. We were a family, after all, bound by the threads of creation and existence. Rimuru would be different, yes, but he would also be a part of us, a new link in the chain that connected us all. And so, I waited, counting the days, months, and perhaps years until the moment Rimuru would emerge. The anticipation was almost overwhelming, but I kept it in check, focusing instead on preparing the way for his arrival. Rimuru would need time to grow, to develop his powers, and to understand his place in the world. And when he finally arrived, he would find himself surrounded by family. A family that, despite its initial hesitation, would love and protect him fiercely. The void, the essence of nothingness, was about to take form, and I would be there to welcome it, to guide it. The future was uncertain, but it was also filled with promise, and I couldn't wait to see what it held for all of us. Velgrind's POV. I've always been proud, confident in my strength and position within our family. But when Veldonava told us about the new sibling, this Rimuru who was to be born, I couldn't help but feel a pang of something unfamiliar, jealousy, perhaps. The way Veldonava spoke of him, with such reverence and excitement, stirred something in me. Why did he place so much importance on this new creation? What made Rimuru so special? Veldonava's words stayed with me, echoing in my mind as I contemplated the future. Rimuru would be different, he said, embodying the essence of nothingness. But what did that mean for the rest of us? For me, I agreed to visit him, to bond with him as a sister should, but doubt lingered in my heart. What if Rimuru's arrival changed everything? What if Veldonava, who had always been our guide, our protector, turned his attention fully toward this new creation? And then there was Veldora, always eager, always ready to charge ahead without thinking. I saw how his eyes lit up at the prospect of a new sibling, how he practically leaped at the chance to meet him. But Veldonava, ever cautious, reminded him of the need to control his power, to not endanger Rimuru in his fragile state. I saw the disappointment in Veldora's eyes, the frustration. I felt it too, though for different reasons. Velzard's POV. Caution has always been my nature. I weigh every decision, consider every possibility before I act. So when Veldonava told us about Rimuru, about this new true dragon who would embody the void itself, my first instinct was mistrust. How could something so different from us be part of our family? What if this new sibling brought disruption, chaos? I listened carefully as Veldonava spoke, noting the excitement in his voice, the pride. It was clear that Rimuru held a special place in his heart, even before he was born. But what did that mean for the rest of us? For the balance we had maintained for so long? I agreed to visit Rimuru, to bond with him, but only because I trust Veldonava's judgment. Yet, my mind is filled with questions, doubts that I can't easily dismiss. Then there was Veldora. His eagerness to meet Rimuru was almost naive, a childlike excitement that I hadn't seen in him for a long time. But Veldonava, ever the protector, cautioned him, reminding him of the dangers his uncontrolled power could pose. I could see the frustration in Veldora's eyes, and I felt a twinge of sympathy. We were all struggling with this in our own ways. Veldora's POV. Excitement coursed through me the moment Veldonava mentioned a new sibling. Another true dragon. The idea of having a little brother, someone to share adventures with, someone who could understand me like no one else. It was thrilling. I could barely contain myself, wanting to rush off to meet him right then and there. But as always, Veldonava tempered my enthusiasm with his wisdom. He reminded me of the importance of controlling my power, of the danger my aura could pose to Rimuru in his current state. It was frustrating. I wanted to be the first to greet my little brother, to show him the ropes, to be the big brother he could look up to. But Veldonava was right. I had to be careful. The last thing I wanted was to hurt Rimuru, even unintentionally. As the days passed, I tried to focus on mastering my power, training harder than ever before. Every time I unleashed a storm or summoned a whirlwind, I thought of Rimuru, of the day I would finally get to meet him. It wasn't easy. I've always been more about raw power than finesse, and controlling my aura was like trying to hold back a tidal wave. But I kept at it, driven by the thought of the future. I couldn't help but imagine what Rimuru would be like. Veldonava described him as embodying nothingness, which sounded pretty mysterious and cool. Would he be serious like Velzard? Or maybe fiery like Velgrind? Part of me hoped he'd be a bit more fun, someone I could spar with and explore the world together. The idea of having a sibling who was totally different from us was intriguing, even if it made the others a bit uneasy. I wasn't worried, though. After all, we're family. Ku-ha-ha-ha-ha. I burst out laughing, the thought of teaching Rimuru all the best ways to cause trouble, have fun, filling my mind. Oh, we'd have a blast together. I could already picture it. The two of us soaring through the skies, stirring up the elements, and making our mark on the world. Veldonava might be all serious and wise, but someone had to show Rimuru the fun side of being a true dragon, right? There was also the matter of Rudra. Veldonava had mentioned him briefly, something about Velgrind spending more time with him. I wasn't too sure what to think about that guy. From what I'd heard, he was powerful, maybe not on our level but still pretty strong for a human. I couldn't help but wonder if Velgrind's interest in him was making her stronger, or if it was a distraction. I'd hate to see her fall behind, especially with Rimuru coming. We're supposed to be the pinnacle of strength, and I didn't want anyone thinking otherwise. Kuhahaha. Well, it's not my problem. If Velgrind wants to spend her time with some human, that's on her. I've got more important things to focus on, like becoming the strongest big brother ever. I chuckled to myself, imagining Velgrind's annoyed expression if she knew what I was thinking. But all of that was secondary to my thoughts of Rimuru. I knew I had to be patient, to wait until the time was right, but the waiting was the hardest part. I imagined all the things we'd do together once he was strong enough, the places we'd go, the battles we'd fight side by side. I just knew we'd get along. For now, I'll keep training, keep working on my control. Veldonava promised I'd get to meet Rimuru soon, and I'm holding on to that. I'm going to be the best big brother ever, and when Rimuru is ready, I'll be there to show him everything this world has to offer. Kuhahahaha. Just you wait, Rimuru. We're going to have the time of our lives. Following Rimuru's birth. Rimuru's POV. We sat there, beneath the radiant canopy of Veldonava's garden on God's mountain, where every leaf seemed to shimmer with a divine glow, bathing the space in a serene luminescence. The air was rich with the scent of celestial flowers, a fragrance so pure it felt like it could cleanse the soul. Veldonava had just given Ciel her own body, a form as radiant as her wisdom. And here I was in my nascent state, a small European dragon with obsidian scales, edged with a soft, violet glow seeping between them. I nestled in Ciel's lap, her gentle yet firm grip reminding me of how fragile I still was. I could barely move, let alone fly or walk. Ciel's touch was tender but resolute, her protectiveness a silent vow that I wouldn't be harmed. We spoke of many things, mostly about what lay ahead. The future, uncertain as it was, began to take shape through our discussions. Veldonava had decided that Velgrind and Velzard would be permitted entry to the mountain, but not Veldora. His uncontrolled aura and overwhelming power would be too dangerous for me, he had said, his voice carrying a tone of both caution and affection. As we sat, Veldonava's garden seemed to pulse with life, a silent witness to our plans. He told us he didn't intend to alter what had already happened in the world, but he had one request: save Lucia's soul when the time came. We reassured him, promising that when the moment was right, we would save both her and him. The relief that washed over him was almost palpable, and for the first time since I had met him, Veldonava looked genuinely at peace. He smiled, a gentle curve of his lips that spoke of hope and perhaps a hint of pride. He was happy, it seemed, to have a new little brother to care for. Veldonava's POV. As Rimuru continues to grow, I find myself increasingly captivated by his development. Watching him stumble and struggle, then succeed in mastering some small new skill, brings a warmth to my heart that I didn't expect. He's still so small, so fragile in many ways, yet there's a strength within him that promises greatness. I often catch myself smiling at his antics, like the way he tries to take flight, only to tumble back to the ground, his little wings fluttering helplessly. It's endearing, and it makes me wonder how Lucia would react if she saw him like this. The thought makes me chuckle, though it also stirs a strange, almost irrational feeling within me. Would Lucia be so taken with Rimuru that she'd ignore me entirely? It's a ridiculous notion, one that I quickly dismiss. Our bond is deeper than that, stronger than the simple charms of a newborn dragon. But still, the idea lingers, a quiet whisper that I can't quite shake. Perhaps it's just a sign of how much I've grown attached to Rimuru, how much he's already become a part of my life. As days pass and Rimuru grows, I can't help but notice the absence of Velzard and Velgrind. They promised to visit, to bond with their new sibling, but since his birth, they've been conspicuously absent. Each day I look toward the entrance of my garden, expecting to see them, but the path remains empty. It's starting to irritate me. No, perhaps it's more disappointment than irritation. I had hoped they would embrace Rimuru as I have, that they would see in him what I do. But it seems their doubts and jealousy are stronger than their curiosity. I try to focus on Rimuru instead, on guiding him through these early stages of life. He's beginning to grasp the basics of his powers, though it will be centuries before he's ready to step into the world on his own. For now, he remains here, under my protection, as I teach him to navigate his own potential. Each day, I see a little more of what he's capable of, and each day, my pride in him grows. But today, my thoughts are elsewhere. I've decided to visit Velgrind and find out why she hasn't come. She's been spending a great deal of time with that human, Rudra, and I need to see for myself how things are progressing. Perhaps she's distracted by him, lost in whatever bond they've formed. It's a concerning thought. Velgrind is strong, but attachments can weaken even the mightiest of us. When I arrived at Rudra's fortress, I was met with resistance. Mortal guards who foolishly thought they could keep me out. I quickly disabused them of that notion, letting them feel the weight of my power even in my human form. The look of terror in their eyes as they realized who they were dealing with was almost amusing, but I had little time for such trivialities. Velgrind appeared shortly after, her expression unreadable as she led me to Rudra. The man sat on his throne, exuding an air of arrogance that was almost palpable. I could see why he might intrigue Velgrind. There's a certain allure to confidence, to power that doesn't bow easily. But it concerned me. Rudra possesses power, yes, but it's his confidence in that power that could be his undoing. He's playing a dangerous game, one that Velgrind should be wary of. I only hope she doesn't let her attachment to him weaken her. She is strong, but she must remain vigilant. The world is changing, and those who do not adapt will be left behind. As I left the fortress, my mind was already turning back to Rimuru. I can't help but worry about the future, about how my siblings' relationships with him will unfold. Will they eventually come to see him as I do? Or will their doubts and fears create a rift that cannot be bridged? Coo! I almost laugh at myself, at how much I've come to care. This wasn't supposed to happen. Rimuru was to be a new creation, an experiment in the possibilities of existence and nothingness. Yet here I am, worrying like a parent about his future, about his relationships, about how he'll grow. But I have no doubt that Rimuru will grow into something truly extraordinary. And when that time comes, I will be there to see it not just as his creator but as his brother. Still, I will have a word with Velgrind. If nothing else, she should see for herself the wonder that is Rimuru. She owes him that much as a sister, and I won't let her ignore that responsibility. Velgrind's POV. I knew it was only a matter of time before Veldonava would come looking for me. He has always been the responsible one, the one who takes his duties as the eldest true dragon seriously. I respect him for it, of course, but there are times when his expectations weigh on me, like a mantle I never asked to wear. When he arrived at Rudra's fortress, I could sense him long before the guards even noticed his presence. Their feeble attempts to bar his entry were laughable, really. I almost pitied them for their ignorance, trying to keep out a being like Veldonava. It was futile from the start. Still, I took my time getting to him, not out of disrespect, but because I needed a moment to prepare myself. I knew why he was here, and I knew what he would say. As I approached, I saw him standing there, calm and composed as ever, a stark contrast to the chaos his mere presence had stirred among the humans. The sight of him brought a familiar twinge of guilt, a feeling I've been trying to suppress ever since Rimuru was born. I know I should have visited the newborn, should have gone to see my new little brother as Veldonava had asked. But every time I thought about it, something in me resisted. Rimuru, what a strange name for a true dragon, I remember thinking when Veldonava first told us about him. Unlike any of us, Veldonava had said, an embodiment of nothingness. I didn't know what to make of that. I still don't. But I do know that the idea of another sibling, another responsibility, just didn't sit well with me. It reminded me too much of Veldora. Another bundle of reckless energy that needed constant supervision. Another being whose antics would inevitably pull me away from what I truly wanted to do. I've already spent so much of my existence dealing with Veldora's unpredictability, and I'm not eager to repeat that experience. The thought of another sibling who might require that same level of attention, who might disrupt my time with Rudra, it frustrates me. I have something good here, something I've chosen for myself, and I don't want to lose it. Rudra is different. He's strong, confident, and, dare I say it, someone I can actually respect. I enjoy being with him, watching him build his empire, seeing the fire in his eyes as he talks about his ambitions. It's a far cry from the chaos that Veldora brings or the weight of duty that Veldonava embodies. When I finally reached Veldonava, I tried to mask my hesitation with a smile, though I'm not sure how well I succeeded. He greeted me warmly, as he always does, but I could see the questions in his eyes. Why haven't you come to see Rimuru? Why have you been so distant? It was all unspoken, yet clear as day. I didn't give him a chance to voice those questions aloud. Instead, I led him to Rudra's chamber, where he could meet the man I've chosen to spend my time with. I wondered if Veldonava could understand, if he could see why I'm drawn to Rudra. Perhaps he'd think it was a waste of time, that I should be focusing on our family instead. But the truth is, I'm tired of being defined by my role as a true dragon. I want something more, something different. As we entered the chamber, Rudra was there, seated on his throne, exuding the kind of power that most humans could only dream of. He met Veldonava's gaze without flinching, his confidence almost tangible. I admired that about Rudra, the way he stood tall even in the presence of someone as overwhelming as Veldonava. It was part of what drew me to him in the first place. But as I watched them interact, a part of me couldn't help but feel a pang of uncertainty. Veldonava's words echoed in my mind, about duty, about family, about Rimuru. I knew what he wanted from me, but I also knew what I wanted for myself. Couldn't they see that I needed this time with Rudra? That I wanted to build something of my own, away from the expectations and responsibilities that came with being a true dragon? Yet, as much as I wanted to focus on Rudra and the life I was carving out for myself, the thought of Rimuru lingered. What was he like? Was he anything like Veldora? Or was he truly different? The curiosity was there, a small spark that I tried to ignore, but it wouldn't fully extinguish. Maybe one day I'll go and see him, I thought to myself, if only to prove to Veldonava that I'm not shirking my responsibilities entirely. But not now. Right now, my place is here with Rudra. The rest can wait. As Veldonava left, I could feel the weight of his expectations lingering in the air. I knew this wasn't over, that he'd continue to urge me to visit Rimuru. And maybe, in time, I would. But for now, I pushed those thoughts aside and turned my attention back to Rudra. This was my choice, my path, and I wasn't ready to let go of it just yet. Third-person POV. 100 years had passed since Rimuru's birth, and the world continued to evolve, subtly shaped by the presence of the newborn true dragon. However, not all was tranquil, and tensions simmered beneath the surface of this seemingly peaceful era. In the skies, moving at sonic speed, a figure soared with unparalleled grace and power, a being whose very presence commanded reverence. This was the Star King Dragon Veldonava. Tall and elegant, his black hair flowed like silk, contrasting sharply with his elaborate, divine robes. His sharp, distinguished features were framed by eyes that seemed to pierce through reality itself, revealing the deep wisdom and immense power that lay within. Veldonava's flight had a purpose. He was heading toward the Ice Continent, a frozen land located to the north of the Magic Continent, home to Guy Crimson's Frost Palace. The Ice Continent was a land of harsh beauty, inhabited only by powerful demons who served the Demon Lord Guy and the Frost Dragon, Velzard. But just as he was about to reach his destination, something caught his attention. A powerful surge of energy, rippling through the very fabric of space. He abruptly stopped mid-flight, his eyes narrowing as he sensed the source of this disturbance. The aura was unmistakable, an overwhelming presence of anger and rage, emanating from God's mountain, the very heart of his domain. His heart skipped a beat as he recognized whose aura this was. The intensity of the energy was growing with each passing second, a storm brewing out of control. Veldonava's thoughts raced, his concern for what he might find compelling him to abandon his previous course and return to the mountain. Upon his return, Veldonava was greeted by a chaotic scene that starkly contrasted the serenity that usually defined his sacred grounds. The first thing he noticed was the human, Rudra, locked in fierce combat with Ciel. Her form was ablaze with pure rage, her every movement charged with a fury that seemed impossible to quell. Veldonava's heart sank as he beheld Ciel, once the calm, rational presence beside Rimuru, now a force of destruction, driven by an anger he had never seen in her before. Velgrind, his sister, was nearby, struggling to maintain a barrier that contained the devastating energies unleashed by Ciel's wrath. Her face was tense, beads of sweat trailing down her brow as she fought to keep the situation from spiraling further out of control. Veldonava's gaze shifted to a woman standing beside Velgrind, a lady with platinum pink hair, her eyes reflecting the chaos unfolding before them. Veldonava recognized her as Lucia, but the usual warmth he associated with her presence was overshadowed by the turmoil around them. A short distance away, a mid-sized dragon lay unconscious on the ground. Rimuru, the sight of him, vulnerable and helpless, sent a pang of worry through Veldonava's heart. He had never seen Rimuru in such a state, usually so full of potential and growing strength, now lying still, overwhelmed by whatever had triggered this disaster. Veldonava descended from the sky, his presence calming yet tinged with the weariness of a god burdened by the weight of his responsibilities. As his feet touched the ground, he took in the chaotic scene with a heavy sigh, a whisper escaping his lips, carrying the fatigue and exasperation he felt. "What in hell is this commotion?" he murmured, his voice tinged with disbelief and a touch of tiredness. He knew he needed to act quickly, but first he needed answers. What had happened in his absence? What had driven Ciel to this state, and how had things escalated to the point where even his sacred domain was threatened? Veldonava's mind raced, yet he remained calm, the divine ruler who had faced countless challenges before. But this was different. The chaos before him was not just a battle of power. It was a conflict of emotions, of bonds that had frayed to the breaking point. And now it was up to him to restore order, to understand the depths of what had gone wrong, and to ensure that the delicate balance of the world, and his family, was not shattered beyond repair. Chapter 5. Catastrophe. Velgrind's POV. Unsettling discoveries. It had been a while since I last visited God's Mountain. The descent towards God's Mountain was always a humbling experience, no matter how many times I had made the journey. The sheer presence of the place, steeped in power and history, always managed to remind me of my brother, Veldonava's unparalleled might. This visit, however, felt different, more urgent. Rudra, with his unyielding ambition, had insisted we come without prior notice. He was driven, as always, by his relentless desire to surpass Guy Crimson, the first true demon lord. He wanted to be the strongest, to stand at the pinnacle of power, and he believed that learning from Veldonava himself would give him the edge he needed. As we neared the mountain, the familiar, overwhelming aura washed over us. Yet, something else caught my attention, an aura that was nearly concealed but not quite. It was powerful, ancient, and distinctly draconic. As we got closer, I finally saw it. A mid-sized dragon with dark violet scales, shimmering faintly under the sunlight. My breath hitched slightly in my throat. This was no ordinary dragon. The aura, though controlled, carried the unmistakable signature of a true dragon. I realized with a start who it was: Rimuru, the newest of our kind, the one Veldonava had been so proud of. It had been a century since his birth, yet this was the first time I had laid eyes on him. Seeing him now, curled up in peaceful slumber, stirred something within me, something akin to guilt. I had not visited him once, assuming he would be like Veldora, another sibling to manage. But this was different. As we landed, the sound of our arrival caused Rimuru to stir. He opened his eyes slowly, almost lazily, and they locked onto mine with a sharp intensity. For a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a spark of happiness in his gaze, but it quickly vanished when he noticed Rudra. Rising with deliberate grace, Rimuru fixed us with a look that was both commanding and dismissive. If you've come to see Big Brother, please leave or find another place to wait. He's not here and I don't know when he will return, he stated, his voice steady and tinged with arrogance. It was almost amusing how he spoke with such authority despite his youth. But it also irritated me. Who was he to dismiss us so casually? A thick vein pulsed on my forehead, a sign of my growing irritation. Quite arrogant, I muttered, but before I could speak further, I heard him whisper something under his breath, barely audible. Says the one who never visited me once when I was born. His words struck harder than I expected, laced with a sadness that was almost tangible. For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. Had I really been so neglectful? But the feeling was fleeting, quickly overshadowed by the simmering anger at his blatant disrespect. I wasn't going to let him talk to me like that, especially not after I had finally made the effort to come. Without a second thought, I unleashed one of my signature attacks, Void Cutter. The energy sliced through the air, aimed directly at him with lethal precision. To my surprise, Rimuru dodged it effortlessly, his movements fluid and controlled. His skill was far beyond what I had anticipated, and before I knew it, we were locked in combat. Third-person POV, the battle unfolds. The air around God's mountain crackled with tension as Velgrind, in her human form, faced off against her younger brother, Rimuru, who had remained in his dragon form. The clash that followed was fierce and unforgiving, with Velgrind showcasing the full extent of her battle-hardened skills. Rimuru, despite his arrogance and the confidence in his abilities, found himself struggling to keep up. Each collision of their attacks sent shockwaves reverberating through the mountainside, tearing through the sacred grounds. Rimuru, though undoubtedly strong for a dragon so young, was clearly outclassed. Velgrind's experience and mastery of combat were evident in every move she made. Her void cutters sliced through Rimuru's defenses effortlessly, and her spatial manipulation bent reality to her will, keeping him off balance. Rimuru fought back valiantly, his attacks powerful but lacking the finesse that came with centuries of experience. His initial arrogance faded as the battle wore on, replaced by a growing desperation. The young true dragon was now a creature fighting for survival against an opponent who was far beyond his current level of power. Despite his best efforts, the disparity in their strength became increasingly apparent. Velgrind's attacks were relentless, her every move designed to push him back, to subdue him, and with a final, decisive blow, she sent Rimuru crashing to the ground, unconscious and defeated. Velgrind's POV, the weight of victory. The battle had been more intense than I anticipated, and as I stood over Rimuru's unconscious form, I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of emotions. Pride for having emerged victorious, frustration for having been forced into such a confrontation, and something else, something I was reluctant to name. He was strong, stronger than I had expected, but he was still so young, so inexperienced. A part of me regretted the fight, knowing he had acted out of a desire to protect our brother's domain. Another part of me was annoyed that he had dared to challenge me at all. But beneath all of that, there was a nagging feeling of guilt. He had been right. I hadn't visited him, hadn't given him the attention he perhaps deserved. Had I been too absorbed in my own pursuits, too focused on Rudra? Before I could process these thoughts further, something else caught my attention. A sudden flash of light. No, a sword, gleaming with deadly intent, hurtling toward me. Instinctively, I prepared to defend myself, but Rudra was faster. He blocked the attack, and for a moment, I felt a rush of relief. But then I saw her, the source of the attack, and my heart skipped a beat. A woman with platinum silver hair, moving with a grace and power that was almost unnatural, was engaged in a fierce battle with Rudra. Her movements were swift and deadly, each strike pushing Rudra further back. Her aura was intense, suffocating even, and I realized with a start that it was on par with a true dragon's. Who was she? How could a human, if she even was human, possess such power? I quickly erected a barrier, trying to contain the escalating destruction. But even with the barrier in place, the sheer intensity of their clash was overwhelming. This woman, Whoever she was not just powerful. She was a force of nature. Rudra, for all his skill, was barely holding his own against her. As their fight reached a critical point, I saw the woman preparing to deliver a fatal blow. Time seemed to slow as I realized Rudra might not survive this. But before she could strike, a familiar presence washed over the battlefield, freezing everything in its wake. Veldonava had arrived. His mere presence halted the battle, the woman's attack stopping mid-air as if caught by an invisible force. Rudra, though battered and bruised, lowered his sword, his eyes wide with a mix of awe and relief. Veldonava stepped forward, his expression calm yet commanding. He looked first at the woman, then at Rudra, and finally at me. His gaze was penetrating, filled with unspoken questions. What had I unleashed upon our home? My thoughts swirled in a maelstrom of confusion, guilt, and frustration. As Veldonava approached, I knew I would have to face the consequences of my actions. But even as I focused on Rudra and the battle we had just survived, I couldn't shake the image of Rimuru, his small, unconscious form lying on the ground, defeated. I had won the fight, but the victory felt hollow. At what cost had this lesson been taught? And could it ever be justified? Third-person POV, a new understanding. As Rimuru began to stir, groggy and disoriented, his eyes fluttering open to the sight of his siblings and Ciel standing over him, confusion clouded his mind. The last thing he remembered was the intense battle against Veldgrind, his desperate attempt to assert his place, to prove he was not to be underestimated. But now, as he looked up at the concerned faces surrounding him, the reality hit him like a cold wave. He had lost, completely and utterly. Before he could dwell on his defeat, Veldonava's voice cut through the air, clear and firm. "Rimuru," he began, his tone stern yet not without compassion. "Do you understand now?" Rimuru struggled to sit up, his gaze meeting his older brother's. The weight of his defeat settled heavily on him, but there was no denying the truth. "I do," he replied, his voice quiet but resolute. "I was arrogant. I thought I could stand against Veldgrind, but I wasn't ready." Veldonava nodded, satisfied with his brother's acknowledgement. "It is not wrong to seek strength, Rimuru, but you must understand your limits and respect the power of those around you. The world is vast, and there are beings far beyond even our comprehension. To survive, you must learn to balance power with wisdom." Rimuru took in his brother's words, the weight of them sinking deep into his heart. He had much to learn, and this experience had shown him just how far he still had to go. But he was determined to grow. Rudra's POV. As we descended towards God's mountain, my thoughts were singular and clear. I would master the sword under Veldonava, and then, with that power, I would finally surpass Guy Crimson. The first true demon lord, that overgrown demon, had no right to the title of strongest in this world. Not when I was here, not when my destiny was to rule over all. Veldgrind, my loyal partner and companion, seemed pensive as we approached. No doubt she was lost in her own thoughts, probably about our grand plans for the future. But all I could think about was the victory that awaited me once I had acquired the power I sought. When we landed, I was the first to stride forward, full of confidence, ready to confront Veldonava and demand his guidance. But then I noticed something odd. A dragon, not too big but certainly no whelp either. Its dark violet scales caught the light, giving it an almost regal appearance, but I paid it little mind. What did a dragon matter when I was about to stand before a god? Yet, as Veldgrind and I stepped closer, the dragon opened its eyes. Those sharp, intelligent eyes focused on us, or more accurately, on Veldgrind, and then shifted to me. The disdain was evident, even in those reptilian features. I could see it in the way the dragon's posture changed, in the slight curl of its lip. But what caught me off guard was the arrogance in its voice when it finally spoke. "If you've come to see Big Brother, please leave or find another place to wait, as he is not at home and I don't know when he will return." The audacity! Who did this dragon think it was, speaking to me, Rudra Namal Naska, the chosen hero, with such disrespect? My hand instinctively went to the hilt of my sword, ready to put this insolent creature in its place. But before I could act, Velgrind spoke, her voice low and laced with irritation. "Quite arrogant," she muttered, though I could tell she was holding back her temper. This dragon had struck a nerve, and I knew better than to intervene when Velgrind was like this. Let her handle it. She was more than capable. But then, something unexpected happened. The dragon, in a whisper, almost as if to itself, said something that caught my attention. "Says the one who never visited me once when I was born." A pang of something, regret, perhaps, flickered across Velgrind's face, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a cold, determined expression. She wasn't going to let this go. Before I could blink, she unleashed her Void Cutter, a devastating attack that had felled many foes in the past. But to my surprise, the dragon dodged it effortlessly, as if it had anticipated the move. Now things were getting interesting. I watched with a mix of amusement and curiosity as Velgrind and the dragon began to fight. The air crackled with energy, the force of their clashes sending shockwaves through the mountain. Velgrind was a force to be reckoned with even when holding back, but this dragon, Rimuru, I think Veldonava had called him, was proving to be a formidable opponent. But even so, it was clear that Rimuru was outmatched. Velgrind's attacks were precise, relentless, and though Rimuru fought valiantly, it was obvious that he was struggling to keep up. Each time he tried to counter, Velgrind was already 2 steps ahead, her mastery of combat far beyond his fledgling abilities. And then, with one final, decisive strike, Velgrind sent Rimuru crashing to the ground. The dragon lay there, unconscious but still breathing, his defeat absolute. I smirked, my arrogance flaring as I took in the scene. So much for the vaunted true dragon. He had been nothing more than a minor obstacle in our path. I was about to step forward, to congratulate Velgrind on her victory, when something unexpected happened. A flash of light, a sudden surge of power. I barely had time to react as a sword came hurtling toward Velgrind. My instincts kicked in, and I moved to block the attack, my own sword clashing against the intruder's with a deafening ring. The force of the blow sent a shockwave through my arm, but I held my ground. Who dared to attack us here, of all places? Then I saw her, a woman with platinum silver hair, her eyes cold and calculating. She moved with a speed and grace that was almost inhuman, each of her strikes precise and deadly. There was an intensity to her that I hadn't expected, an aura that was disturbingly similar to that of a true dragon. This was no ordinary opponent. I grinned, feeling the thrill of battle course through me. Finally, a real challenge. I welcomed her attacks, relishing the clash of steel against steel, the adrenaline that surged through my veins. But as the fight wore on, I realized something. She was pushing me back. Me, Rudra Nam ul Nazca, the chosen hero. How could this be? No matter. I would show her and everyone else why I was destined to rule. I pressed forward, determined to turn the tide, but she was relentless. Her movements were fluid, almost effortless, each one calculated to exploit my weaknesses. And though I hate to admit it, she was succeeding. But I wouldn't give up, not now, not ever. I would prove my worth even if it killed me. As she prepared to deliver what could have been a killing blow, I braced myself for impact, ready to make my final stand. But before she could strike, everything stopped. A powerful presence washed over the battlefield, and I knew immediately who it was: Veldonava. His arrival was both a relief and a frustration. I didn't need his help. I could have won this fight on my own. But as the woman's attack halted in mid-air, I had to admit, albeit grudgingly, that I was glad he had intervened. As Veldonava approached, his gaze sweeping over the battlefield, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of irritation. This was supposed to be my moment of triumph, my victory over the strongest. And yet here I was, saved by the very person I had come to surpass. But no matter. This was just a setback, a minor one at that. I would learn from this, grow stronger, and next time I would not be so easily outmatched. Veldonava's presence, while imposing, was just another reminder of what I had to achieve. And I would achieve it no matter what it took. For now, though, I would play the part of the grateful ally, the humbled hero. I would bide my time, gather my strength, and when the moment was right, I would strike. Because in the end, it didn't matter who my opponents were, Guy Crimson, this woman, even Veldonava himself. I would defeat them all, and in doing so, I would create the perfect world I had always envisioned. A world where disputes could be settled with words, where my rule would bring peace and order to all. But first, I had to survive this, and as Veldonava's gaze landed on me, I forced a smile, hoping it didn't betray the anger simmering just beneath the surface. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Veldonava's POV. As I arrived at God's mountain, the scene that greeted me could only be described in one word: chaos. The once serene and sacred ground was torn apart, energy crackling in the air, and I couldn't help but ask myself, what in the hell is happening here? My gaze swept over the battlefield, taking in the sight of my unconscious brother, Rimuru, and the raging battle between Ciel and a human I quickly recognized as the arrogant Rudra Nam Al Nazca. Ciel was seconds away from delivering a killing blow to Rudra, her movements precise and lethal. I stopped in my tracks, crossing my arms and observing the situation. First, I looked at Ciel, her expression cold and unyielding. Then my eyes shifted to Rudra, who, despite his bravado, was clearly outmatched. Finally, I turned to Velgrind, who stood nearby, her emotions a mix of frustration and pride. With a wave of my hand, I erased all traces of damage done to the mountain. The scars on the landscape vanished as if nothing had ever happened, the air stilling, and the chaotic energy dissipating into nothingness. Then, with a snap of my fingers, a table and chairs appeared before us, perfectly arranged as if we had gathered for a casual tea party instead of a battle. I took my seat at the head of the table, motioning for Rudra to sit across from me. To his right, Velgrind gracefully took her place, her eyes still burning with the fire of battle. On his left, the beautiful lady with platinum pink hair, who I assumed was Lucia, hesitated for a moment before sitting down, her cheeks tinged with a slight blush. She seemed to be somewhat flustered by the sudden turn of events, but she composed herself quickly. Ciel, having confirmed that Rimuru was unharmed and merely sleeping, moved to my right side, her demeanor calm and composed as ever. She began preparing tea with practiced ease, pouring it into my cup before moving on to serve the others. As the fragrant aroma of the tea filled the air, I could see the question marks hovering above everyone's heads. They were all wondering the same thing. Why was this mysterious woman, who radiated such overwhelming power, suddenly acting like a humble servant? Without wasting any more time, I broke the silence, turning to Ciel with a raised eyebrow. What exactly happened here? Why were you fighting Rudra? Ciel smiled, her expression one of pride and unwavering loyalty as she responded. Rimuru-sama gave me a mission to find certain individuals. While I was on that mission, I felt fluctuations in his mood and rushed back as quickly as possible. When I arrived, I found him unconscious, lying on the ground. Without a second thought, I attacked the ones responsible. Her voice was calm, almost serene, but I could see the fierce determination in her eyes. Ciel was utterly devoted to Rimuru, to the point where nothing else mattered to her. Right and wrong were irrelevant. Her only concern was her beloved master's well-being. And I knew that her unwavering loyalty was one of the reasons why Rimuru had become so arrogant. She spoiled him, indulged his every whim, and though it was endearing in a way, it also worried me. I sighed internally, realizing that I would have to scold Rimuru for his arrogance. But then, as I glanced over at his sleeping form, still curled up in his dragon state, all thoughts of reprimand fled my mind. How could I be harsh with him when he looked so adorable? No, I couldn't do it. Not now, at least. As these thoughts ran through my mind, I shifted my gaze to the three individuals sitting at the table, all of them clearly waiting for my judgment. First, they greeted me respectfully, and Rudra and Lucia introduced themselves. Velgrind, of course, simply nodded in acknowledgement. There was no need for formalities between us. They explained the purpose of their visit, their desire for Rudra to learn from me, and I listened quietly, my expression unreadable. Then Velgrind asked the question that had been on her mind since the beginning. "Who is Ciel?" I smiled faintly and replied, "She is Rimuru's subordinate, guardian, and caretaker." There was a brief silence as they processed this information, and I could see the gears turning in their minds. But before any of them could ask more, the conversation was interrupted by a soft groan. I turned my head to see Rimuru slowly waking up, his eyes fluttering open as he shook off the remnants of unconsciousness. His gaze met mine, and I fixed him with a stern look, my tone firm as I asked, "Do you understand now?" Rimuru blinked a few times, his expression thoughtful before he nodded slowly. "I do," he said quietly, and then, to my surprise, he rose and took his place behind me, standing with a newfound elegance and pride. The arrogance that had colored his earlier actions was gone, replaced by a more refined demeanor. He was still prideful, he was a true dragon after all, but it was a controlled pride, tempered by the lesson he had just learned. The others were clearly shocked by Rimuru's transformation, their eyes wide with disbelief. They had seen him moments ago, full of youthful arrogance, and now here he was, displaying a maturity that was far beyond his years. But I knew better. Rimuru was still just a child in many ways, despite his past life memories. He was growing, learning, and though his journey was far from over, I was proud of the progress he had made. As the tea was poured and conversations resumed, my thoughts turned back to Rudra. Just as I expected, he wasn't content to let things rest. With a determined gleam in his eye, he suddenly challenged me to a duel. The request was so bold, so typical of Rudra, that I couldn't help but smile. "Very well," I said, accepting the challenge. The duel was over in an instant. I easily overpowered him, my experience and strength far surpassing his. But instead of being discouraged, Rudra grinned and, out of the blue, declared me his sensei. He pleaded with me to train him, his arrogance and greed shining through in every word, and Velgrind and Lucia quickly joined in, adding their voices to his request. I sighed, pretending to be reluctant, but in truth, I was amused by their determination. After a moment of consideration, I finally agreed. "Fine," I said, waving my hand dismissively. "I will teach you, Rudra." As their faces lit up with excitement, I couldn't help but wonder how this new chapter would unfold. Rudra's ambition was boundless, his goals lofty and idealistic. He wanted to create a world where disputes could be settled with words rather than violence. A noble dream, if a bit naive. But with Velgrind and Lucia by his side, and with my guidance, perhaps he could come closer to realizing it. For now, though, I would keep a close eye on all of them. The path ahead was uncertain, and though I trusted in Rimuru's strength and Ciel's loyalty, I knew that challenges lay ahead for all of us. But no matter what happened, I would be there, guiding them, protecting them, and making sure that the balance of this world remained intact. Chapter 6. The Destroyer Part 1. Veldonava's POV. As the meeting concluded and the formalities gave way to more personal exchanges, I watched Velgrind, Rudra, and Lucia as they prepared to take their leave. The meeting had unfolded as I anticipated, each of them playing their roles to perfection. But as Velgrind moved to depart, I caught a fleeting glimpse of something in her eyes, a spark of resolve, a determination that stirred a sense of curiosity within me. It was subtle, barely noticeable, yet undeniable. She mentioned wanting to speak with Rimuru, and though the words were casually spoken, they held weight. I simply nodded, acknowledging her intent. The bond they shared, complex and layered, was beyond my interference. As they turned to leave, my thoughts drifted toward my own destination, the ice continent, where Velzard and Guy Crimson awaited. The chill of the north had always been a place of solitude and reflection for me, a stark contrast to the warmth I had come to know with Lucia. Time moved differently for beings like us, but the responsibilities, the burdens we carried, were eternal. The cold winds of the north called to me, their familiar bite a reminder of what awaited. Yet, even as I prepared for the journey, I couldn't shake the image of Velgrind's eyes, the resolve that simmered beneath the surface. She returned after a brief absence, and with a final exchange of farewells, they departed. As their presence faded into the distance, the quiet of the mountain settled around me once more. Alone with my thoughts, I allowed myself a moment of stillness before taking my leave. The north awaited, and with it, the cold clarity that I often sought in its embrace. Rimuru's POV. As Big Brother Veldonava and the others vanished from sight, leaving behind only the lingering echoes of their power, I turned to Ciel, my ever-present companion and confidant. There was a certain comfort in her presence, a sense of knowing that whatever challenge lay ahead, she would face it with me. Ciel, about the mission, I began, the anticipation barely masked in my voice. Did you find someone? A small, knowing smile curved her lips as she nodded. Yes, Master. The grin that spread across my face was one of pure satisfaction. So you found it, huh? All right, let's go meet them. With that, we ascended into the sky, the wind rushing past us as we soared westward towards the God's Mountain. Or more specifically, the western edge of the vast forest that surrounded it. A place where dragons roamed, where fire and ice clashed in a never-ending dance of primal fury. The very thought of it sent a thrill through me, the anticipation of what was to come stirring my blood. Big Brother had forbidden me from leaving the area, but within its boundaries, I had all the freedom I needed, and that was more than enough for what I had planned. Our destination was a battlefield unlike any other, a place where the elemental forces of fire and ice had torn through the land, leaving a landscape of devastation in their wake. As we arrived, the aftermath of the battle was evident in the charred and frozen remains of the forest. On one side, the fire-type dragon's fury had scorched the earth, turning trees to ash and leaving the ground cracked and blackened. On the other, the ice-type dragon's wrath had encased the forest in ice, freezing everything in its path. Where the two forces had met, the land was a chaotic blend of scorched earth and icy formations, steam rising where fire and ice had clashed. I took in the scene with a critical eye, assessing the damage and the power that had caused it. Judging from the extent of the destruction, I'd classify this as at least disaster class. I murmured. Yes, Ciel confirmed, her voice calm and composed as always, yet carrying an undercurrent of concern. A broad grin spread across my face, the thrill of the challenge making my heart race. That's exactly what I wanted. Well done, Ciel. She inclined her head slightly, a modest smile playing at the corners of her lips. I am not worthy of such praise, Master, but thank you. I waved off her humility, my focus already shifting to the task at hand. Ciel, stay out of the fight. I want these dragons to serve under me. Her expression turned serious as she bowed in respect. As you command, Master. With that, I descended toward the battlefield, the anticipation thrumming through me like a live wire. My mind raced with possibilities, each one more exciting than the last. These dragons, these powerful, untamed creatures, would be formidable allies, but first, they needed to be brought to heel. As I landed before them, the fire-type dragon let out a low, rumbling growl, its eyes burning with a fierce, unyielding hostility. The ice-type dragon, in contrast, regarded me with a cold, calculating gaze, its breath turning the air frigid. There was no fear in their eyes, only the primal instincts of beings who had known nothing but power and dominance. I'll make this simple, I said, my voice carrying a mix of arrogance and amusement. Serve under me, and you might just live to see another day. The fire-type dragon roared in defiance, flames flickering along its massive body, while the ice-type dragon's breath grew colder, its disdain for me palpable. It was clear they had no intention of submitting without a fight. So, that's how it's going to be? I murmured, a playful smirk tugging at my lips. Fine by me. Let's see what you're made of. The battle Rimuru's POV. The battle erupted in an instant, the dragons attacking with a ferocity that was both terrifying and exhilarating. The fire-type dragon unleashed a torrent of flames, turning the air around us into a blazing inferno, while the ice-type dragon summoned a storm of ice shards, each one sharp enough to slice through steel. I moved with lightning speed, darting between the attacks, the heat of the flames and the chill of the ice brushing past me as I narrowly avoided being roasted alive or frozen solid. The intensity of their combined assault was staggering, and for a moment, I found myself struggling to keep up, the sheer power of their attacks pushing me to my limits. But retreat was not an option. My pride wouldn't allow it. Ciel, analysis. I ordered through our mental link, my mind racing as I searched for a weakness in their onslaught. Both dragons possess power nearing the peak of disaster class. Their coordination is formidable, but there are weaknesses. Ciel responded, her voice calm and precise, a steadying presence in the midst of chaos. Good, I muttered, my mind latching onto her words like a lifeline. The battle was pushing me to my limits, my magic reserves depleting faster than I liked, but I refused to give in. Then, amidst the chaos, a sudden clarity washed over me, a moment of pure, unfiltered insight. And with it came a voice, clear and commanding. Unique skill void acquired. A rush of power surged through me, a dark, exhilarating force that filled every corner of my being. A wicked grin spread across my face as I felt the newfound strength coursing through me. Looks like I just found my edge. With renewed confidence, I launched a counterattack. Summoning the power of my newly acquired void skill, I created spheres of pure nothingness, hurling them at the dragons with deadly precision. The void attacks cut through the air like knives, consuming everything in their path. The fire-type dragons' flames were snuffed out as if they had never existed, while the ice-type dragons' frost shattered like fragile glass. The dragons roared in fury, their primal instincts urging them to fight on, but I could see the fear beginning to creep into their eyes. They had underestimated me, and now they were paying the price. Let's turn up the heat, shall we? I taunted, my voice dripping with arrogance as I unleashed a barrage of void attacks. Each one struck with lethal precision, wearing down the dragons bit by bit. But they were resilient, and the battle dragged on, neither side willing to give an inch. For 12 grueling hours, we clashed, the forest around us transforming into a war-torn wasteland. The fire-type dragon attempted to incinerate me with a massive fireball, but I countered with a void sphere, the two forces colliding in a violent explosion that shook the earth. The ice-type dragon tried to encase me in a barrier of ice, but I shattered it with a pulse of void energy, turning the ice to nothingness. Despite their ferocity, I could feel the tides of battle shifting in my favor. With each passing moment, I became more adept at wielding my new power, and the dragon's attacks grew weaker, their movements slower and more desperate. Finally, with one last, devastating void attack, I struck them both down. The fire-type dragon's flames flickered out, and the ice-type dragon's frost melted away, leaving them both battered, beaten, and at my mercy. Panting from exertion, but filled with a sense of triumph, I approached the fallen dragons. Now, do you understand? I said, my voice low and commanding, every word carrying the weight of undeniable authority. You have two choices: serve under me, or be erased from existence. The dragons, too exhausted to resist any longer, lowered their heads in submission. I grinned, the thrill of victory coursing through me like a drug. Good choice, I said, my tone light but with an edge of satisfaction. The weight of the moment settled in as the dragons bowed their heads, their massive forms humbled before me. They had fought with everything they had, their pride and power fueling a relentless assault. But in the end, it wasn't enough. I had emerged victorious, and they now belonged to me. As they swore their allegiance, I could feel the connection between us solidifying, a bond forged through battle and submission. These dragons would be powerful allies, beasts of immense strength and unyielding loyalty. With them under my command, my own power would only grow, and the possibilities seemed endless. But it wasn't just about gaining new subordinates. These dragons would be something more. A challenge, a test of my own abilities, and perhaps even a means to push myself to new heights. I turned to Ciel, who had observed the entire battle from a distance, her expression unreadable. The way she watched me with that serene, almost knowing gaze, always held a depth that was difficult to fathom. She had seen everything, yet she remained as composed as ever. "You did well," I said, my voice softer now, a rare note of gratitude lacing my words. There was something about the way Ciel stood by me, always present, always dependable, that stirred a deeper connection within me. It went beyond mere loyalty. It was a bond that had been forged through countless trials and challenges. Ciel bowed her head slightly, her eyes meeting mine with a look that spoke volumes. Pride, respect, and something more profound that words couldn't capture. "It is an honor to serve you, Master," she said, her voice calm and sincere. Her humility, while genuine, carried a weight that resonated with me. Ciel had been with me from the beginning, guiding me, advising me, and supporting me through every step of my journey. In that moment, I felt a deep sense of appreciation for her, an understanding that our bond was something unique, something that had grown stronger with every trial we faced together. "Let's head back," I said, my voice carrying a note of finality. The battle was over, but our work was far from done. There were plans to be made, alliances to forge, and power to amass. The path ahead was clear, and I was determined to walk it with confidence and resolve. As we ascended into the sky, the two dragons following at a respectful distance, I cast one last glance at the battlefield below. The forest, though ravaged, would recover in time, just as I would continue to grow and evolve. Today, I had proven my strength, not just to the dragons, but to myself. Each victory, each battle was a step forward, a step closer to achieving the power and influence I sought. As we flew back towards the heart of the God's Mountain, the cold wind whipping past us, I couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation, a burning desire to see what the future held. The thrill of victory still coursed through me, but it was more than that. It was the excitement of the unknown, the challenge of facing whatever came next, and the knowledge that I was ready for it. This was just the beginning. With Ciel by my side and my new subordinates at my command, I knew that the path ahead would be filled with trials, but I welcomed them. Every challenge was an opportunity to grow, to prove myself, and to leave my mark on this world. As we neared the God's Mountain, I allowed myself a moment of reflection. The journey ahead would not be easy, but I was ready. I had the strength, the resolve, and the support of those who believed in me. With them, I would build something greater, something that could stand against the very forces that shaped our world. And as we descended towards the heart of the mountain, I felt a deep sense of purpose, a burning determination to carve out a legacy that would be remembered for eternity. This was my path, my destiny, and I would see it through to the end. Third-person POV. Time, ever relentless, flowed on like a vast river, sweeping away the days, years, decades, and eventually centuries. The world changed, landscapes shifted, and civilizations rose and fell. Yet amidst the inevitable march of time, a few constants remained: Veldonava, the Star King Dragon, and the family he had grown to cherish above all else. As nearly 4 centuries passed, Veldonava found himself more entwined with his family than ever before. No longer just the distant god watching over creation, he became a husband, a brother, and a man who found joy in the simple, fleeting moments of mortal life. The bond between him and Lucia deepened with every shared experience. Their journeys across the world were not just about exploration, but about discovery, of each other, of the world, and of what it meant to truly live. Together, they had wandered through ancient forests, crossed endless seas, and witnessed the birth of stars. They had seen the beauty and the tragedy of life, and through it all, Veldonava began to understand the weight of the world he had created. Eventually, the couple chose to settle down, to carve out a life for themselves that was ordinary, yet extraordinary in its simplicity. It was in these years of quietude that Veldonava found a peace he had not known before, a peace that came from being truly present, not as a god, but as a husband and brother. In parallel, Rimuru was undergoing a transformation of his own. The playful and curious being that once marveled at the world with childlike wonder had evolved into a figure of unmatched charisma and confidence. Rimuru's power had grown exponentially, and with it came an awareness of his abilities that bordered on arrogance. He moved through life with a relaxed, almost nonchalant attitude, secure in the knowledge that few could rival him. This self-assuredness often manifested as a brash, sometimes dismissive demeanor, particularly towards those outside his close circle. Yet beneath the surface, Rimuru was driven by a deep sense of responsibility, a desire to shape the world into something better, to protect those he cared about, and to forge a future where strength and wisdom walked hand in hand. His evolution was not just one of power, but of purpose. His confidence, while sometimes overwhelming, was rooted in a genuine concern for the world and those within it. Today, atop the revered god's mountain, preparations were underway for a gathering unlike any other. A grand table was set, surrounded by intricately carved chairs, each representing a seat of power and influence. The air was thick with anticipation, for the one who had summoned this assembly was none other than Veldonava himself. He sat at the head of the table, his arms crossed and his eyes closed, the weight of countless millennia resting on his shoulders. One by one, the invited guests arrived, their presences heralded by the subtle shifts in the atmosphere. Feldway, the first of the 7 angels of origin, was the first to appear. His arrival was marked by a serene, almost ethereal calm, his divine nature evident in every step he took. Moments later, the air crackled with an almost palpable energy as Guy Crimson, the first true demon lord and mediator of the world, made his entrance. His aura was one of barely restrained power, a reminder of the primordial forces that govern the world. Following him was Velzard, the frost dragon and ice empress, whose arrival brought with it a chill that seemed to freeze the very air. Her gaze was as cold as her domain, yet within her icy demeanor lay a fierce loyalty and an unyielding strength. Next was Rudra Namal Nazca, the emperor of the Eastern Empire and true chosen hero, whose presence was commanding and regal, exuding the authority of one who had led nations and shaped history. By his side was Lucia, her quiet grace a stark contrast to her brother's imperial bearing. Finally, Velgrind, the scorched dragon, entered the chamber, her fiery presence a burning contrast to her sister's frost. Each took their designated seats, their eyes collectively turning towards Veldonava, who remained silent, his eyes still closed. Veldonava's POV. The room was silent, the air thick with the weight of expectations. I could feel their gazes, each one heavy with anticipation, curiosity, and perhaps a touch of impatience. Slowly, I opened my eyes, and the room seemed to still even further. They greeted me with the respect due to a god, each taking their place at the table. Yet I could see the unspoken question in their eyes. Why had I not begun? I let the silence linger, a deliberate choice to allow them a moment to settle, to feel the gravity of what was to come. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm, carrying the authority that came naturally to me. Some individuals are missing. We will hold off until they return. The words hung in the air for a moment, met with a mix of acknowledgement and silent resignation. My role as the Star King Dragon demanded patience, and so I closed my eyes once more, sinking back into the quiet weight, allowing my mind to drift, yet remaining ever vigilant. Third-person POV. Far from the serene gathering on the mountain, within the dense, untamed forest that surrounded it, the aftermath of a brutal battle lay scattered across the ground. Corpses of monsters, their forms twisted and broken, littered the earth, a grim testament to the power that had been unleashed here. Atop a pile of these lifeless bodies sat a figure, their long silver-violet hair cascading down their back like a waterfall of moonlight. Even in repose, their form radiated a majesty that was undeniable. They sat in a meditative pose, their eyes closed, their breathing calm and measured, as if the carnage beneath them was of no consequence. The stillness of the scene was broken only by the approach of 3 figures, their steps quiet yet purposeful. One of them, their voice soft yet filled with reverence, spoke. "Master, it is time." The meditating figure did not move at first, the words hanging in the air like a delicate thread. Then, slowly, they opened their eyes, revealing orbs of molten gold that seemed to pierce through the very soul. The expression on their face was one of quiet contemplation, but as realization dawned, a smile spread across their lips, a smile that was equal parts anticipation and satisfaction. Rising from their position, the figure exuded an aura of overwhelming presence. Their golden eyes gleamed with a light that was both inviting and dangerous, promising power beyond comprehension. "So, it is time, huh?" they murmured, the smile broadening into one of pure, unrestrained delight. With a final glance at the battlefield they were leaving behind, the figure turned, their movements graceful yet brimming with latent power. As they began their journey towards the gathering atop God's mountain, the forest seemed to sigh in relief, as if the very earth had been holding its breath in the presence of such a being. The figure moved with purpose, each step bringing them closer to the convergence of power and fate that awaited them. And as they walked, the world itself seemed to bend around them, acknowledging the force that was now in motion, a force that would soon shake the foundations of reality itself.